And welcome. And of course, we're going to be talking today about destructive versus non-destructive editors. And I've been racking my brain. I'm going to need your help. I'm currently calling this working session Beauty and the Beast. And Amanda, obviously, so you figure it's pretty obvious which is which in this case. So we'll need some suggestions from you as to what we're going to do with titling this, because we'll probably have this an ongoing series as long as you'll put up with us. So a couple little just real quick things. I'm doing my best to monitor the chat feed. So if you see me glance over, I'm going to try to do it primarily when Amanda's talking and not end up having it be something that's distracting me all the time like it is now. I'm going to mute that session over there so I just see the chat. So when you see that happen there, you know what happened, that I was having to watch back and forth, and I'm going to avoid that. So what we're going to do is we're going to show a couple different DAWs, a couple situations. Amanda's going to start with the demo showing, I think she's going to do Pro Tools and maybe Twisted Wave, and she may get into some other things. But what I'm going to do is introduce you to Amanda. Now, you should know, Amanda's forgotten more than most people will ever know about audio. Just in audio books alone, she's got over 500 titles that she's mastered, edited, put out there. And so sometimes people act like they know a lot. She's always so humble, but she really, really knows her stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda. We're going to start with a little demo. I may show a couple things. I'm going to be watching the feed. We'll take some questions, and we're going to try to wrap this whole thing up in less than 30 minutes. So Amanda, welcome to the show. Can you show a little bit about the DAWs, destructive versus non-destructive?
Hi, everybody. Okay, so first off, let's do a little screen share here. Get this over here. And here we go. All right, so now you guys should be seeing what I see. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to open up Pro Tools.
Me, Amanda.
Oh, yep, there we go.
And that's just going to ruin their day.
Your lovely face there. There we go. We should be on Pro Tools now, though, right?
Yeah, we're seeing Pro Tools. That's perfect.
Great. Okay, so we're going to talk on we're going to use a few different programs, but Pro Tools is just a good place to start, especially because it can record in both destructive and non-destructive forms. So that makes it particularly useful. So I guess we should just start off on the basic question we've been talking about. What is destructive recording and non-destructive recording and editing? Basically, the difference is metadata and session files versus not using session files. A lot of you might know that if you record in something like Pro Tools, generally you're left with a bunch of different, they used to be called regions if you have Pro Tools 9 and below, now they're called clips. So we're just going to do a little bit of recording here. And here we go. Test, 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 1, 2. There we have a little bit of recording there. And I want you to take note, we are currently in a regular non-destructive mode. So I'm going to zoom in here, and like we do, I'm just going to put a little punch in. Let's say we don't like that last time we said test. And we're going to start recording again. Test to test to test, test, test. All right, so now we have a couple files. Now, these are actually 2 audio files, not just one. Even though we're in one session, say we're recording a chapter or something of that nature, this isn't one file. This is now 2 files. And one way you can tell that is by looking at the file structure in the folder. Now, this is our Pro Tools folder right here. And you can see we have our session file right here, but we also have this audio files folder. And if you open that up, you can see we already have a few files. I actually did a little bit of recording before we started this session. So you can see there's actually 5 files there. And these last 2, 4 and 5, are the last ones we did. So the great thing about that is because we have all this information here, we can go and say we like this second little take we did, right? But there might be something from that first one that we like a little better. So in non-destructive editing, you can go right here and you can pull it in. And nothing ever goes away. See? So even though you recorded over it, it's all still there. I know in the punch session we did before, we talked about how you could think of punch and roll recording as sort of laying pieces of tape on top of one another. And this kind of shows how we can do that. Now, Pro Tools, like I said, can also do destructive recording. So let's turn that option on. That's right up here in option, destructive record. Now we're going to do another little bit of recording. So test 345, 345, test, 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 test. All right. So now we have that. And say it's the same as before, we want to do a little punch, but now we're in destructive mode. So we'll just place, let's say, the cursor right here, and then we'll do a little bit of recording. 345. Test, 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 and we stop. Now, see here we have these two little bits that we can play around with and pull in and out. Because we did a destructive recording here, we do not. This is one file. We literally recorded over and got rid of that other material that we had.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So what happened to your unused audio? I mean, where'd it go?
Well, in that second instance where we just did destructive recording, it is gone. It no longer exists. So we've recorded over it, and in effect, we've gotten rid of it.
Can I do an undo?
No. Well, you can do, actually, it depends on the program you're using. In Pro Tools, you cannot, as you can see right here, when you do destructive recording. In some programs, like say Twisted Wave, you might be able to do one undo, but generally no. When something is destructive versus non-destructive, that is one of the drawbacks, is once you start recording over, that is it. That's a very important distinction to make.
All right, can I ask another question, please?
Absolutely.
All right, so if you're doing punch and roll type recording, so what's the advantages if I'm doing punch and roll, you know, in one versus the other? Because some programs do punch and roll. I know that are definitely doing destructive editing, or maybe they have macros that can do punch and roll, even though they're destructive, they're still doing, they have some macros, so they can do a punch and roll too. What's the difference? Well, how does that work?
The difference is, as we just showed sort of in the editing here, when you do punch and roll in a non-destructive program, like how Pro Tools usually is, a lot of people don't even know that they can destructively record in Pro Tools. So the default option is always to use non-destructive. The advantage is that, look, say I don't like the way this last part was in that first take, or say I like the way this last thing was in this first take, but I want to replace this here. I can just sort of noodle around and do some editing and combine them, right? Like, oh, this T is pretty cool, but I really like the beginning of this part. I can just sort of blend them, and I can do some fading, and I just have a lot more creativity and a lot more flexibility here than I would on, say, this. We did a little punch here, right? And it's gone. There's no editing I can do here. You know, wherever I punched in too early and I cut off a consonant or something like that, it's gone. I have to redo the whole thing. Whereas if I do that in non-destructive programs, I can just pull out and pull in and just sort of do a little combination here and find out what works the best. And it's going to make it sound a lot smoother in most cases. You know, you have programs like, and Reaper's the same way, by the way. I just prepared a little thing here so people, in case they're not sure what kind of program their program is. Reaper also does non-destructive editing. So you can see here as well, you can kind of pull some things out and pull them in and combine them in a way that you can't do in some of these other programs. For instance, I have like a cornucopia of programs here. Let's pull open Twisted Wave here. You can see I did a little bit of recording. Twisted Wave is an interesting program because it is fully destructive. It doesn't even have session files, which means it only it saves the audio file and that's it, which does have some useful application. But see here, we'll do a little edit, right? And you might go, oh, look, but you can pull in and you can pull out, and it's the same. And it is the same for one edit, but as soon as you go to make another edit, that little area here where we saw the editability goes away. So you can only do the last one that you did. Which has obvious limitations, especially when you're working on a book, you know, and you're just going to be doing punch in after punch in after punch in. And then you have some programs also, I think maybe Don will talk about this a little bit later, but we also have programs like Audacity that technically have session files. But the problem with those, so just open this up real quick. Yeah, let's just cancel this out. A lot of plugins. I don't use Audacity a whole lot, mostly because of these problems that we're going to talk about. But you'll see Audacity does do this stepping technique, which we've talked about a little bit before, I think, in our last session. But the editing is still destructive, and you can tell that just by making little edits here and there. We don't have that ability to pull in and pull out and really get to the meat of our edits. So you can see here, go back to the Pro Tools instance, that is the main difference. So it's basically about flexibility and being able to really make your edits as perfect as possible and have flexibility later to work on them.
So if I were maybe, a perfect narrator, and that would be a joke. But if I were perfect, then it wouldn't matter which way I record. Would that be accurate?
If you were perfect,
Well,
possibly,
that's a
but
little rhetorical, okay? Because not happened in any other aspect of my life. I'm not expecting it to happen here either.
yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect, and not only is nobody a perfect narrator, but no one is a perfect editor, and it's really helpful to have the ability to go back and make those fixes. And that's one reason, there are applications for destructive editors. They're not so bad if you're doing just regular commercial voiceover or something short like that. They can make certain things happen a lot more quickly and easily. But when you're dealing with long form narration and books and that kind of thing, I just don't think they offer the appropriate amount of flexibility for
Okay,
recording.
so if I hear you right, you're saying that you would recommend to most narrators that they are using a non-destructive editor of some sort. Is that accurate?
Narrators and book narrators, absolutely. Yeah, I think that non-destructive is definitely the way to go for that.
Okay. I'm watching the stream here. I haven't seen a single question from you people out there, so get on that. But that's okay. We're gonna. Anything else that we should know, Amanda, about this that you can think of? And what I'm gonna do is give you permission when I'm doing mine to interrupt me as I skip over things. But anything else that we should know before I show a couple other things?
I think that probably I'm good for now. I'm sure I'll pipe back in,
Okay.
as soon as I think of something else.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over, and of course, every time we switch screens here, you will notice there's a little slight lag that takes I don't know, 5 seconds between screens,
Sure.
and so you should be seeing here my screen, and I'll pin that up there. So I'm looking at Studio One. I also have Audacity open with the same file, and in this case, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to create my retail demo because I know that's what you really care about. Well, this happens to be chapter one of a specific book. And when I was editing the chapter, then for this lady, I went ahead and I put in a couple markers. And I tend to do this because, we get down to the end and they want the retail demo and they haven't told me what they want. And they're like hemming and hawing about it. And I'm like, I just want to get done. But I thought this would be kind of an interesting example here. So I had done this. And if they want something different, cool, that's fine. But I had marked what I thought would be good. So I put in this marker. You may not be able to read that on your screen, but I think it says RD start, which stands for, very, very cleverly, retail demo start, and RDN question mark, because I just picked something that I thought would be decent. What I'm going to do here is control, and I'm going to pick this whole thing. And now I have what I'm going to call my retail demo. Just a couple minutes here. And so what I can do is I can go through, and I'm going to use the menu this time, by the way, simply because I have some keystrokes that I would do this. And I actually have a macro that does it as well.
And
So,
everyone's aware this is Studio One, right? Just so I know,
oh,
I went through a few different programs. I'm not sure if we brought that up.
okay, I'm sorry.
Want to make
Thanks.
sure.
I appreciate that. No. So yes, this is in Studio One, but you can do this in all the non-destructive editors. You can usually
Mhm.
do it. So I'm going to pick out this. Now, what I would do many times if I was in another program that was destructive, I would simply duplicate the track and create another version of it so that I could have one to go back to, and that's fine. You can do that. That works great. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take my little erase tool here. I'm going to get rid of that event. I'm going to get rid of that event. So now what I've done is I've taken my file, and you can see I had the original down here. You can see it was 13 minutes roughly. And I've pulled out a couple minutes for our retail demo here. And what I want to do is take that. And now you all know retail demos, sometimes they just start off and come flying in at full volume. And that's just great. You're not going to hear it because it's playing through my monitors here. I cheated today. I'm not feeding everything through the Hangout, but it just starts full voice. And what I want to do in this case, sometimes the big boys, they do a fade in, okay? So I'm going to pretend that I'm important, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this really hard action here of dragging this fade. Oh, lots of work there. And probably at the very end, I might fade out as well. So now I have a fade in and a fade out. And sometimes I don't, so I'll play this back. And well, let me mute this track down here. I just muted that extra track. I would have had both of them playing. But now it's fading in at this particular point. You can see the visual on it. And I listen to that and I go, I don't like that fade. So I'm going to grab that fade and I'm going to readjust that fade there to a slightly, it's going to take a little longer. You can just see the visual on it. I'll expand that a little bit. So the visual is showing how it's going to be when I'm done in terms of the fade there. So I can grab that little control and change my fade. Now we're not talking about fades, but I probably am going to, whatever I do on the beginning, I'll match that on the end. And so if I do this kind of fade, now I might make it a little longer, and then I'll go through and I'll listen to it. Everybody does this. This is no big deal. And we get to the very end here, and I think I want to leave them wanting more. All right. I think, right, that's good, but it's not great. I wonder what else I had there. Well, I could go down to this here, then I can copy this up and put it back because remember I cut this off. But here's where it comes in being a non-destructive editor. Well, one, at the very beginning, remember I just deleted this stuff. Now I've done a lot of other steps. I adjusted some fades. And so I could go ahead and I could work the undo stack. Almost all programs that are reasonable have a history window, and and I could go through and I could undo and get my way all the way back. I mean, it's doable. I don't recommend that, but it's doable.
But you don't have to do that, do you?
No, because I'm too lazy. Because all I need to do is, yes, I deleted that out, but behind the scenes, as Amanda said earlier, it's not deleting. So non-destructive means it is smarter than me, and it is keeping the things that I did in the background in case Don says, I wonder if I should start that earlier. Maybe I could just listen to it. And all the audio that was gone is still actually there in the background. And I didn't like this ending, and while you didn't hear it, I want to make it more dramatic, and I happen to know the next few words are more dramatic, only because I rehearsed my demo. And so what would happen here now is it's going to have something at the very end that it didn't have. And while you can't hear what it is, I got some audio back that I had accidentally cut off the first time, or I thought it was good, but then I listened back and realized, ooh, this could be better. And then if I really want to be totally obnoxious with this kind of thing where I have non-destructive editing, I can do some other things here as well when we're working with the high-end tools. Pro Tools will do this, Reaper will do this, and all the we'll just call them the premium DAWs. I'm going to select that area, and I have the ability to do other things because it's non-destructive. Because of the way you can take these little sections, you can do some other things with them. For example, I'm going to split this. I'm going to use my little macro. I could have used the menu to do that. I've got a keystroke to do it. And I have this little area. And I'm going to be the most obnoxious guy that you can think of. And I'm going to go in here and do something that you can do in all the premium DAWs. And I'm going to enable an event effect. And what that's going to allow me to do is right here in this little section, I can go over here and I'm going to say, where is my reverb? I'll get some reverb here, and it's probably under R for reverb, or it's going to be under, where's reverb? Does anybody see reverb?
So you're creating an effect stack here? Is that what we're doing?
Well, here's the cool thing that we're doing. We are actually creating an effect just on that one effect. I'm going to color it for you. I'll color it. I'm going to go red. Red, whoops. Red stands for reverb. Okay. Now, by the way, I'm the most obnoxious guy when I'm working by myself. I love a very clean display, so I'll hide things that I'm not working with. Like I would normally have this track hidden. I don't like to see clutter. I'm not working with that track. I would hide it. And color, I use color to remind myself of different things. And you can do this in a lot of different programs. But here's what I can do. Since I wanted dramatic at the end, don't do this in your demos, by the way. But if I pretend that I was obnoxious or more obnoxious, and right here, and while you can't hear it, I now have an insane amount of ridiculous, obnoxious reverb on a little bit. But because I have this non-destructive thing, after doing that, I might decide to take the fades and deal with the fades here and fade it differently. I can
Sure.
still go all the way back to the beginning here, and that audio is still all there and can be adjusted. And so what I did here was not important. You're not going to want to put reverb on. You're not going to necessarily want to change the end or the beginning, and maybe your author doesn't like that you faded it in and they just want a complete
Sure.
normal straight up start. And because it's non-destructive, I can have different options, and I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm making a lot of changes. I can still go back to the beginning if I want easily, and I have a lot of options. And just as another, to uh, sometimes I get frustrated about this. There are so many options that people don't realize why somebody like Amanda selects one of the I just call them the premium DAWs, because it gives her
Well,
options
it is
not just at
important
the
to note
beginning. Hold
though,
on, let me get
because
you on screen here. Go ahead, say that.
so it is important to note that it's not necessarily a matter of premium versus lesser. It's more a matter of just the application. For instance, in addition to working on books, I also work on video games a lot. And sometimes those video games, they don't have these long chapter files like we have with books. They have an incredibly large amount of discrete small files, usually a sentence or two. And in the case of those, I use destructive editing all the time just because it's faster and it's easier to deal with smaller chunks, that need to go out. So I just want to say it's not so much about premium so much as specifically for long form narration needs, what ends up working better. Because I mean, doing that kind of editing in Pro Tools is actually counterproductive. So it's just sort of like what your need is.
Great, great,
No.
great, great, great. Good. Glad. Thank you for clarifying that.
Oh,
Excellent,
no
excellent.
problem. Yeah.
And so what you can see is this is about flexibility. And also, just as a side note, almost all some of the DAWs, while I'm doing all this, there's a whole thing going on in the background, and they all have this. Make sure that your autosave is running. So that's just a
Oh,
bonus tip for today, that while I'm doing all this stuff, every 5 minutes mine is set to where even if I'm not thinking about it, I have save points every 5 minutes. And you can do this in Reaper. You can do this in Pro Tools. You can do this in Audition. You can do this in most of the programs, and you want to have this set up because at some point you get really comfortable doing this, and I think I'm pretty good. And then I make a stupid mistake that costs me a couple hours, except I have a combination of non-destructive editing. I also have backups. I also have autosaves that go back every few minutes. And because of that, we have flexibility. Now, just a very quick, if I was doing the same thing over here in Audacity, and Audacity is really a good editor if you have it set up right. If I took out this, so I might need to get rid of part of it, the beginning of it. I had done the same sort of thing. Now that's gone away at the beginning, and I would find my flag. Oh, and it didn't move this flag over. So the flag's, kind of messed up, but I'll pretend I knew exactly where it was. So I'll take this Shift N and I'll delete that out. Now I have my demo here. Hopefully I'm making great backups. I'm not working on the original copy, and that's just standard things. But if I go in here and I highlight a range, then throw in and I'll do it from the menu here. I've got a keystroke and I fade in. And then if I go to the end and I put my fade out just to do the same cheesy demo type thing, and effect, fade out. And so now I faded in, faded out, and then later my author comes back and says, hey, you're an idiot. Don't start there. Start earlier, start later, whatever. Now what do? I kind of start at the beginning, because once I've done a few things beyond
yep.
that, and I could put echo on here too, that's one of the effects that's available here. So there's my echo, and if somebody loves it, fantastic. And if they think it's terrible, well, What am I going to do? If I really want to go back and adjust this beginning, I'm going to start all over. Okay. So it is about some flexibility. So let me,
Hmm.
Amanda, what did I, let me switch this off. What did I miss there? What else should I talk? We've got about 5 minutes. Take
Well,
questions.
one thing that I would like to also point out is just in terms of, different programs have different words for it. I know in Reaper we have render, but in Pro Tools you can either bounce or you can export files. I just wanted to, forgive us if we're starting at the bottom here. We just want to make sure everything's completely clear. Let me hold on. Can we let me screen share one more time?
Okay.
I just wanted to let people know that there are certain things that you can do in certain programs that will be not undoable. For instance, in Pro Tools, when you export a file, you consolidate it, right?
Right.
Once you consolidate something, you can't. That's it. You've created a new file. So that's important to know that there are some things you can do, even in editors that are primarily non-destructive, that aren't actually undoable. And it's also, I know we talked a little bit about the difference between a session file and an audio file. And one important thing is, you might know, Don, if you save this file here, um, would that be it? Would that be the audio file, or is there something else you have to do to get that audio file
So
ready?
are you talking in Studio One?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Studio One has the same thing where I think of it as a file cabinet. It has its own little file cabinet where it organizes internally all the
Right.
different pieces, and they call it a song. And in that, and all the little pieces that are behind the scenes are going to be stored there. And so you open a song, and it knows, for example, the audio that's here. And I had somebody ask, Dave Wright ask on the stream here, well,
Mm-hmm.
if I close this file, what
Sure.
happens? And do I want to save changes? Assuming I save changes here, I'll save changes. And then I'll go back in, I'll go to my start page, and I'm going to reopen that. And then he wants to know is if it's non-destructive, I come in the next session, can I still go
Yep.
back? And what you see is, Dave, I hope that answers your question. I just saved it, shut it down, reopened it, and the file is still there, and it is still non-destructive. I still could go back and change any, so my
Absolutely.
fades could be managed here, and I
And
can go
that's
back.
true. Yeah, and that's true in Pro Tools too. It's true in all of them. But I was getting sort of more to the idea of, you have this song saved, right? But this isn't the actual file that you would give to like your rights holder, right? Like you would need to do something else.
Yeah,
Because this
that's
is a
correct.
non-destructive editor, for instance, in Twisted Wave, because Twisted Wave is destructive, when you save, you're saving your audio file, right? But when
Right.
you have another program like Reaper or Pro Tools or Studio One, there's always going to be another step involved.
Yes, correct. Absolutely. You're going to, for example, in this case, in order to pass MP3s, to pass Wave, to pass things to other audio engineers, we are going to go through and we're going to do this process that they call a mix down. And so it's going to take this, and then you get a chance when you're doing that to decide which format that you're going to go out in terms of, is it going
Sure.
to be a Wave or is it going to be an MP3, and which parts of this recording do we want to send out, where we could even do between, since I had put flags in there, markers, I could just export
Mhm.
between my two markers as well. There are a lot of different options, but yes, there is the original song file, and it is a container. It's a file cabinet,
Exactly.
and it's managing all the details so that we don't have to. And then when it comes time to put the file out, now once we do this mix down, at
Hmm.
that point, it is now one file, and you can't go back and undo anything. Also, if we use a program like RX, then RX is destructive. So I can undo different things, and there's an undo stack, but I have a tendency to run out to RX, and then I'm doing a batch process. But since I'm doing a batch process over here, in my usage scenario where I'm doing that, that's non-destructive. But I could always go back to Studio One and get the original file and tweak it, and then run it
Sure.
through the same batch. So go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, and it's the same thing. I frequently use RX and Pro Tools as an audio suite, right? And that's the same thing where you can process a file, but you can always go back to the original file
Right.
before you processed it. And in some cases, you can even, like here, if you'll allow me to just kind of share my screen really quick.
Yep.
Uh,
And
get
we've got
this.
about 3-4 minutes here, Amanda.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end. Let me share and go to here, right? Can you see the Pro Tools in the window?
Yes.
Okay. So say I think that this is really clicky. I'll go here and I'll maybe I'll pick, I like using the decrackle. So I'll ramp it up. So like, I don't know, I'm just
Go for
doing
Max.
something
Go
here.
for it. Go for it.
Oh, the way that, you know what's
No.
actually kind of amazing about the decrackle is that sometimes you can run it on 10 and it still doesn't sound terrible, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. But
It
anyway,
wouldn't be, but you'd change your quality to high there, I would hope, right? If you're doing that.
yeah, this would probably be a good idea.
Okay.
But anyway, we're just,
Yeah,
messing
we're just
around.
playing here.
So I'll just take this part and I'll just process it, right? And the cool thing is, though, you still have, like with any other kind of edit, I can still say I don't like the first part of that part that I've decrackled. I can combine them and, there's lots of options here that you don't necessarily have on something that's destructive. So it's just pretty cool. Um,
Great.
and in this case, if I were to, we talked about the mix down in Studio One. There are a few different ways you could do that in Pro Tools. I could copy this and maybe, yeah, you can consolidate, which makes a whole new file. Then you can either you can bounce, which I know some people know about, which is it's the same as render in Reaper, Mixdown, and Studio One. They all have different names for the same thing, which is infuriating. But
Yeah,
like
I
it's
agree.
just
I
so
agree.
annoying. Or you can export, which is Shift Apple K, and it's the same sort of thing. But it's just getting to the matter of what we were talking about before. There's a lot of different processing you can do, and it just gives you the option of doing that if you're doing non-destructive.
And I just stole your screen there, Amanda. And
Yeah.
just so that we're all on the same page here, this one has some different events, and there's a couple different things. I'm going to select all of those. And if I control B, it does a bounce in place and consolidates them all into one on this track. There is an ability to go back, and they have a merge option that will allow you to so there's even options in most of these things that you can do this where you merge them all together, and then you still can go back if you need to. So when you combine that with autosaves and keeping reasonable backups in terms of the versions that you're going through, most of us who have been doing this a while,
Yeah.
mainly because I've learned this the hard way, I will be doing a save as when I get into an edit session, even though it's keeping everything. And in theory, I should never have to go touch the original because it's keeping it all. I'm still, yeah, I just do it
Yeah.
anyway. I'll keep a backup copy. I'll do a save as and do that. So I'm going to get out of this here, stop my screen sharing so that I'm not doing that. And that was kind of a quick and dirty on
Yeah.
non-destructive editing versus editing. Remember that there are times where both of us use destructive editing. And most of the time when recording audiobooks, and I'm going to speak for Amanda, and then she can confirm or deny or say, hey, don't listen to the man behind the curtain. Um, for audiobooks, non-destructive gives you the most options. And am I paraphrasing that correctly, Amanda?
Absolutely. Anything long form, it's always better to have more options.
Okay. Now there's a minor cost to all this, and it's called the initial learning curve complexity because some of the programs are certainly more complicated in the startup phase. If you're going to learn Pro Tools, you're not the first day you get it going to be an expert in it. It has so
No.
much depth. There are so many. Oh, it's second day, Amanda.
I've been using Pro Tools over a decade and I still learn new things
Okay.
every.
So here's the thing. You do in the beginning, there's some startup time with all these programs that give you the options. What I promise you is that over time, as you do more books and get more comfortable, there comes a point where something will go wrong and you will go, oh, I just saved 4 hours. I just saved 2 hours. I just saved a half hour. But it will come up over and over again because as you do a lot of it, you make mistakes. Anytime you do, people have accidents on the road every once in a while because they may be a great driver, but stuff happens. So Amanda and I are both into making sure you have the right tools at the right time. If you have questions, remember, I said this before, there's almost nobody on the planet that knows more than Amanda. And while you might
It's
think,
it's a lot
I,
to live up to. I don't know
I
about
don't
that.
know. Anyway, the bottom line is she's forgotten more than most people know. And if you need information, we're both on Facebook. Be sure to join the groups that we're in. We've got, we're both in different groups. I mean, we're not
Absolutely.
married, we're good friends, but so you can contact her. Occasionally we disagree. But we really look forward to seeing you on the wires. We'll be doing this again over the next couple of weeks. And send us questions, send us comments, subscribe to this channel if you want notifications. Let us know how we're doing. We're here to make sure that we're getting information out to you. If you ask good questions and you share this with other people, we'll see that people are interested and we'll keep doing it. If nobody watches, we're going to go have our own little party instead. So, Amanda, any last words?
I think that's about it. Feel free. Any questions you have, just pop them our way.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your time today. We look forward to seeing you in the next couple of weeks. We haven't figured out exactly our schedule yet, but I promise you we will be back, and we look forward to seeing you on the wires. Have a great day. Bye-bye.